We're ready.
Okay.
Thing is not doing much, so.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Jerry, you've taken the roll.
Yes,
Yes.
well, Rick is on his way,
Rick is on his way
and
and
Eric will,
may be
he's
joining
gonna
us.
try to be online.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the minutes of January 28th and March 7th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any corrections or additions for those sets of minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item number 5. The Board of Education requests $245,560. This amount was set aside in the capital fund for the air conditioning project at Goodwin School, and an action is requested.
So, if I may, this was already approved from surplus funds at a town meeting. So it's a request to tell the Board of Finance that basically you're asking, their Board of Ed is asking for the funds that were previously set aside on the town side for the Board of Education. Really can't explain it, but, I said action is requested, no action is actually needed. It's more of the Board of Ed advising that that's what they're doing, but.
Well, we always like to make sure that the
Right.
Board of Finance is informed, so I appreciate the fact that Carl, put it on the agenda. We don't want to just assume that we can spend the money. We want you to know about it. We want to make sure that you're aware. The project is well underway. We have a lot going on between April break and then in June, right after the kids get out, the lion's share of all the electrical kinds of pieces and parts will take place. And everything is ordered, everything is being manufactured as we speak. And if we get the money for the grant that we applied for, we would come back and, put that money right back into that account. We don't know, we were supposed to know the end of January. And just as of last week, we heard they're still working on it. So we don't really know, but it would be around 200 to 250 that we would receive if we do, if we're lucky enough to get that first round of grants. And we'd come back to you and, make sure that we put that money back in that account.
So will the project, with this funding, will the project be nearly complete?
Yeah, this will, between there's several pieces, and I think I sent that to the Board of Finance when we went forward for the grant. There's pieces and parts from which this project was sort of put together. Some of it'll come out of the what we refer to as the sinking fund, which is really an off-budget account. Some of it came from operating budget funds last year, and some of it is going to come from the funds we're requesting here. So there's a variety of places that we were able to put those pieces together to complete this project. It's about 1.8+ million.
Wasn't this also some money you dedicated, some of the federal money to?
Yeah, oh, yes, yeah, right, sorry, Bruce. Yes, about 680,000 is the federal grant money, which is obviously a big portion. So all those pieces put together, fortunately, are paying for this particular school. And it sort of comes in the nick of time. That building is extremely humid, and even in the months you wouldn't expect it, we have water. I think air conditioning is really going to help.
Julie, the 250 that you have into fiscal year in 24, would that be negated by this 250 that you think you might get back in the grant? That you say you would put back in the fund? Are we talking about the same 250?
So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. The money we're requesting tonight.
You have 1.8 million in the fiscal year 24
Yeah.
for the air conditioning.
Yeah.
So the 250 that you just talked about that was pre-approved, will that reduce the 24 budget by 250? Because are we talking about the same 250?
We don't have any money in the operating budget for this.
I'm looking at it right here.
Oh, is that the central
It's in the
office?
capital.
That's the central office. Air
It
conditioning.
says Goodwin School, 250.
So that was done as a projection of what we needed to finish the project. So that 250, the 250 we're requesting is that 250.
So it's the same 250.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so when do you think you'll know when you'll get reimbursed on the 250 you're spending?
We're not getting reimbursed on the 250. We're getting reimbursed on the 1.8 million. We get, not the federal funds, those get reduced. So like 1.2 million, we're getting potentially a grant that we applied for. And we will know, we were supposed to know the end of January, and here we are, the end of March. They called me last week and asked for the minutes, which I resent to them. They had them in the grant application. And so it sounded promising, but I hesitate to even say that, but we should hear very soon to answer your question, John. I thought it would have been before now.
That was the question I was going to ask before. we get-
Gotcha, okay.
When will the unit be operable?
Well, if all the stars align and, we're bringing the power in from the street, everything's going underground. So there's a lot of coordinating between the electric, the phones, the cable, and the fiber, all have to be brought underground. The goal is to have it online by the end of August.
Right.
I have some questions. Julie, I had some questions. Reference to, do we have any waivers come in on the purchasing of books?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a state requirement that you have to purchase so many books?
No state requirement, I'm not sure, I understand, but no, there's no requirement.
Well, I've seen some articles in the paper about some of the other schools are looking for waivers on purchasing books.
Oh, no, that's a whole different, that's, when we get to the budget, I'll be happy to talk about that. That is a waiver for, a mandate that the state is looking to implement, for all school districts, that we adopt one of 6 reading programs.
Okay.
And I think that's what you're referring to, because that's been in the newspaper. They're looking for a waiver. We have money in next year's budget to pilot 2 of the different programs to see which one we may need to purchase in the future.
And a couple other questions I had about has there been any change in the actual versus proposed, such as the ECP or for the $44,000 for the tuition for and also proposed on the kindergarten teacher, whether or not that's proposed for one more kindergarten teacher, whether that's still going to be as we go forward, that you're planning on enrolling or hiring that teacher.
So we're still enrolling students right now. That goes through the end of this month. We'll have a bit of an indication come the middle of April or so. But so far, we haven't changed those plans yet.
So if you don't get the added student enrollment that you need for the added kindergarten teacher, will you keep that dollar amount there because something could happen between now and September?
So that teacher was added in this current year, which is why you're seeing it. It wasn't budgeted because we didn't think we were going to need it, but we got a fairly significant amount of students enrolling after the enrollment period. So that's what that position is.
So how many kids do you have in the K, that program, the first year of K program, whatever it is? I mean,
The pre-K or K?
though it'd be K, I believe, because pre-K is only set amount, right? Like 60 or something?
It's up, yeah, it's about 68, I want to say. I have it here. Look.
Right, the numbers are 68 with 61 next year.
61 or 51.
Yeah.
I guess I'm more interested in K. Isn't it K is the one that would create the need for an additional teacher?
We didn't add the additional teacher. We had 3 classrooms prior to this current year. We added the 4th in this present year.
Right. I
Yeah,
We
understand
didn't
it.
have the
So-
money.
But we
So
didn't
have
have
to
the
add
money.
to make up
All
for.
right, I understand that. Well, how many students did you have To create that problem.
68 or 67,
Okay, and then this year, you're anticipating how many?
about 61 or 62. Let me just pull my enrollment out. Hang on 1 second, I've got it here.
We've got it in the
Here it is.
letter.
That's the projection for 24.
That's the projection, yeah. We're currently at 68, and well, looking at two different projections, we're between 61 and 68. Depending on whose projection you wanna,
All right, so you're definitely gonna need that teacher, period.
yes,
To stay.
right, which is why we, trued it up, so to speak, for this budget that we're talking about, the proposed budget.
On this description here, we talk about projected, proposed, realized, et cetera. So there's a lot of waiver in there, what the actual dollar amounts are. That's why I asked you.
And we do, for those of you that, look at the board enrollment kind of the figures that come through for board enrollment, we went right into June, we looked at those numbers and it fluctuates considerably. So the superintendent does have the latitude, all the way up till August to adjust, full-time equivalent positions. Some become pluses and some become minuses. And that happens sort of at an ongoing basis because the enrollment, we do see a bit of a fluctuation. They had us projected to really go down and we haven't. So, you try to hedge your bets and figure out where you're going to land. It's been a little challenging.
That's not just a student, you have to know what services that student needs.
Correct. Yeah.
What grades are in the elementary school now?
Pre-K through 4.
4. And in the middle school, it's 5 through 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you guys gonna stick around for the budget discussion?
Yes.
Can I ask one question also? So if you added a teacher at Goodwin or added a teacher for kindergarten.
We added a teacher for kindergarten in this current.
Yeah, but why? Because you couldn't have been like at 40,
We were at 3 the prior year, yeah.
3, but
Yes, our enrollment was
That low.
that low.
So what's your first grade now?
what's in a class? How many in a class? Like 15? Yeah. So
And
you
then,
were at 40, you're saying you were at 45 to 50 and you really?
yeah, that's what I mean, the
Okay, that's-
fluctuation. And you know what happens in kindergarten is some parents decide to keep their student out for another year. So that kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten number is sometimes often for us to predict because they may not send their child till they turn 6. So it's kind of a.
That was me.
And we know who we have in pre-K, but we don't have all the pre-K kids
Correct.
in Goodwin. So we can have an
Right.
idea of what's out in private that might be coming to us, but we really don't know until signups.
Yeah.
And even then, a lot of people wait.
Yeah, we do. We do. Somebody else asked a question.
I asked you about, to tell them the number from 2
First
years
grade?
ago, just look at a different year.
You wanted first grade?
If that's what makes
That's
it
what the
work.
kindergarten would have been.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Well, first grade is 55 this current year. Going to 70, 69 or 70 projected.
Okay, Charles.
Move right
We could go back to.
I guess the question, are we having a budget discussion?
Yes.
Or are we having,
Yeah.
we're having it later on the agenda, right?
Yeah, we'll have it after the finance director's report where it is on the. agenda.
But I guess. Yeah, well, that item was simply for the request. Yeah, right.
A little.
I don't want to
Yeah.
cut them off.
You're not.
Okay. My treasurer report is gonna be brief anyway, small. So, the treasurer report for February, seems like so long ago. So, the executive summary, so fiscal year to date in February, the town received revenue of 49,160,762, or 101.6% of the total amount of 48,377,698 budgeted. When comparing our performance to last fiscal year, we are 1.8% ahead of this time last year due to interest income outpacing expectations and tax revenues overperforming.
How come your numbers are reading different than mine?
Did you not print the new sheet that Jerry sent yesterday or today?
I'm using the sheet that she left on my desk. It says 101.6.
Yeah.
Right.
101.6.
She said 101.
Oh, yes. No, 101.6, 1.8%.
1.8% ahead, if
Of
I do
budget.
my
Oh,
calculations.
okay, I got you now.
Okay. I'll do the math for you if you want.
No, I got it. Don't be sarcastic.
It's just having a little fun with you, Brad.
She is the
Alright.
treasurer.
So next,
paycheck.
next we'll, what?
I just want the health insurance.
I don't get any health insurance. What are you talking about?
Keep going.
Next is the authorized investment section. As of the end of February, the town had 39.1 million in its bank accounts. In the last month, the stiff rate stayed very steady at 4.61%, and today it is at 4.68%. In mid-February, the investment committee moved 5 million from Webster Bank to the stiff account. Okay?
So the 7.8, I don't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
So is it 7.8 or is it 2.8? Because you took 5 out.
So the numbers you're looking at there are correct. We have 20,000, I'm sorry, 20 million, 20 million in STIP. We have 7 million in Webster. And then the rest, we have 10 million in our rainy day fund. We have the 1.2 is ARPA. That's all being invested in, short-term bond letters. And so that totals the 39.1.
The monies were moved intra-month, so these are the month-end numbers.
Right. They were moved around, I don't know, it was mid-February,
Are they,
like February
are we
16th.
fully insured on those?
Yes.
Yes,
On which ones? All of them, yes.
well, they're all
So
FDIC.
Webster, we have an agreement with when we did our banking RFP,
Mhm.
that they hold collateral according to state's 20% rule that they have, but they also have an agreement and a line of credit where they put deposits aside for government, and then they collateralize them with I can't remember what they collateralize them with, but like treasuries and agencies or something like that. So we have an agreement that was part of the RFP negotiation, so we didn't have to worry about
So we're safe.
yes.
I mean, just as with a business that might have 10 million or 20 million to make payroll, I mean, we can't be putting, 250,000 in 65 banks, right? Yeah, I mean, so that's the position that non-individuals find themselves in. You have to have a chunk of money in banks. So we can
Okay.
move it to JP Morgan or Bank of America like everybody else, right? I mean, but very good.
I think we're pretty good. That's about it on the authorized investment section. So then pension plan. So at the end of February, we did receive our report as usual from Morgan Stanley. And the town's pension plan is up 5.61% fiscal year to date versus its benchmark of 4.62%. Over the 3-year horizon, the town plan has returned 6% versus its benchmark of 5.37%. And the fire department's pension plan is up 5.42% fiscal year to date and has returned 5.85% over the 3-year horizon versus its benchmark of 5.37%. Overall, Did you want to say something
No,
about
go ahead.
pension, Carl?
Nope.
Overall, the treasurer's responsibility is to oversee all the monies belonging to the town. As of February 28th, 2023, we had a total cash balances of 39.1 million, total pension balances of 25.2 million, for total assets under management of 64.3 million. And then we'll move to page 2 of the treasurer's report for the detail broken out.
Can I ask,
Yes, go ahead, please.
when you say on the pension plan, that's the town pension plan, 25.2, but you're not adding in the fire department pension plan?
I didn't hear that.
You were talking about total assets. And so
Yes,
39.18, I got that. But then you said on the town pension plan, 25.2, but we wouldn't consider that 1.6 in the fire department as our assets?
I really take 25.2 as the entire pension plan.
No, that you
I should have,
both-
I should have
both
taken the
of them. Yep.
1.6. You're right,
Yeah.
I messed up. More money.
And just so board knows, we did meet with Milliman at our last meeting, and they reviewed our assumed rates of return, 6.75 and 6.5, and they didn't recommend a change. You know, I thought they might recommend a change. They still may next year or the year after, but for now, they feel like we're in a good place. That was an 8.25 assumed rate of return, probably in 2012 or so. And it's down to 6.75. I think the pension board will follow our actuary's been recommending over the years. We finally got where our actuary recommended in terms of rate of return. And we're also making the actuarially defined contribution. So at this point, we're kind of where we should be in terms of contribution and assumed rate of return. Anyway, that was from Becky, what's her name?
Sealman.
Becky Sealman at Milliman. So again, never discourage you from coming to a pension board meeting this Thursday at 8:30.
They're actually fascinating.
If you'd like to tune in, they're virtual, of course, hybrid. So you don't have to be there in person. So anyway, go ahead.
No, pension board meetings are really interesting. I do think so.
The pension board does
It's a
good work.
great report.
The board does very good.
Till
work.
9. They go through an awful lot. They're
Yeah,
very
fantastic.
interesting. You should give one a shot.
One is shot.
Give it a shot. Yeah.
All right, let's,
All
what's
right,
next?
let's finish up here.
Okay.
So page 2 of the treasurer's report. Rick Swan just came on. Yeah.
Okay.
Tax revenues were 1,642,635. How did he get on there this year?
Oh, really?
All right, for the month, bringing the fiscal year to date total to 47,371,537, or 101.1% of the amount budgeted for fiscal year 2022. In terms of local revenues, the town collected $1,816,316 in local revenues, or 101.6% of our fiscal year 2023 budget in February. Anybody have any questions?
Right, it's on the back of the finance. I know, but if you go to the finance director's report, it's good to the back of that.
This here. Okay, finance director.
We're saving paper. Sorry about that.
Last. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the finance director's report? Seeing none? Lena?
I also have a very short report tonight. First, in terms of potential surplus that we might be looking at for the end of fiscal year 23, as the treasurer just presented, we have already met our revenue budget and exceeded it by about $800,000. So there's a revenue surplus right at this moment of $800,000. I always assume that expenditures are going to come in about as budgeted, although we usually have under expend. But I do, looking at the history of past fiscal years, we may get in another $1 million or so. So, $1 million to $2 million range. I mean, we really have had an awful lot of money coming in from interest income that was not expected. We budgeted 75,000 and now we're at 500,000. We had back taxes that we were not expecting to collect that was supposed to be 500,000. I forget what the exact number. So there's $1 million right there. In all likelihood, we're going to have a very strong surplus at the end of this fiscal year. But that's yet to be determined exactly. And every month, as we get closer, I'll fine tune these notes. We haven't had any activity because we've been focusing mainly on the budget. So page 2 of the finance director's report, just in terms of cash flow. In the general fund, during February, we were down $1.5 million. We took in $1.8 million in revenue and we spent $1.5 million in expenditures. In capital funds, are up $86,000. That came from $95,000 that we received from Connecticut Water for paving a road. We put it into a paving account until they paved the road, and then we use those funds to pay for it. So that's all that was.
Cornfield, that's related to Cornfield Point and the water work that was done down there.
In terms of reserve funds, there is actually no activity in there, although you can see that it's up $9,000. This goes to show you the effective interest. This is an interest payment that we keep our municipal reserve funds in a separate bank account. So in 1 month, we earned $9,000. That's almost $100,000 a year. And if you think about it, we put aside $300,000 a year. So, that's helping us to make a lot of gains there in terms of interest. And then the combined of all of our non-major funds down $186,000. And again, the usual suspects, the youth and family budget down $32,000, and the payment of our pension payroll down $140,000. That explains that. There was no, on page 3, we didn't have any movements, major movements in any of our off budget capital accounts, so that remained the same. And then we have spent $550,000 of our $665,000 in on budget capital expenditures for the year. So we're almost completed. We only have a few more months left, and we're almost completed spending all of the capital funds. All of our budget line items are right where they should be. There's no outliers or anything concerning at this point. I am going to talk a little bit about the pension plan, but I'm going to stop here. Does anybody have any questions just on our normal expenditure?
Can you explain that non-major funds to me again?
So in our audit statement, the auditors group all of our funds together for us. We have general fund, we have capital funds, which are everything, every capital project that we have. We have reserve funds, which they're listed, they're actually listed on the page in this report. And then non-major funds are everything else. That's the over 100 funds that we have, off budget funds combined. So, another way to look at that is that we have $4 million in off budget funds total. And then I just talk about the movements of the cash flows. But we also have, $4.2 million in reserve funds and $3.2 million in capital programs.
When you were talking about the 186,000, you mentioned youth and family, 32,000. What was that?
So the youth and family budget is in an off budget fund. So every year, I think the budget is $430,000 or $40,000 appropriation. We take that $430,000 and we move it into an off budget account. And from their total budget for youth and family is like $680,000. So the town pays $430,000, then we get client fees, and then we get grants. So in an off-budget account, it would become one of the non-major funds because it's off-budget. And so every month they spend about $32,000 running their programs. So we see that cash flow happening almost every single month. And the pension funds, our cash portion anyway, is at Webster account, Webster Bank. We have an account there that does our payroll. We see $40,000 going out every month in our pension plan. So those are the main drivers of all of those funds every month.
Question on the gazebo, $20,000, it's the left, what else do you have to do to?
That's the electrical work.
Oh, that's the electrical work.
Yeah.
Oh, still waiting on that.
No, he actually, I saw him today. They're about to ramp up that work. Because
Okay,
they've already done some work, some lights.
that's what I was
already in.
wondering.
Yeah,
The other information was an information item that I just thought that the Board of Finance might find of interest. Carl, a few weeks ago, was talking about some of the potential legislation items, and one of them was to move certain municipal functions to the Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement Fund. And I thought it was a really great time to showcase what a good job our pension board has done in managing our portfolio. You know, we are better funded. We have lower liabilities. Our investment assumption is lower than theirs, 6.75. And just to build upon what Carl was talking about, the actuary does a projection over 30 years what our return would be on our portfolio using today's assumptions, and it's 6.9%. This is the first time it was ever higher than our assumed rate. So as we all said, we finally made it. Obviously, we're going to watch that every year. If the markets change, we would change it too. But pension plans like to be at the 50% rate probability of achieving that rate. So we actually have probably like 55% or a little bit greater. So good place for us to be. Our employees pay in more to the plan than CMERS do, and our employer contribution as a percent of payroll, obviously because we're better funded, is only 14% versus theirs of anywhere from 19 to 25%. So our ABC, actuarial determined calculation of 850,000, that's that 14% number. And I know we had our chair of the pension board in here when he made the case for us paying our full ADC, and below just listed some of the really important accomplishments that they've done. And this is many years of work. And I think, you know, the proof is in the pudding, but when we compare it to another well-used pension plan by many municipalities here in the
so
state.
not only do we have an outstanding volunteer pension board, but just so this board is aware, Leanne has driven significant change there in terms of investment policy statements. She's brought a lot of her former life experience at her previous job into this job, and there's been a lot of changes over the last 7 or 8 years, and all for the good, and it's due to good volunteers. Nothing to do with me, everything to do with the volunteers and some of the professional advice we've gotten in-house from Leanne and certainly from Milliman and others. So I'm not looking to take credit for this. It's happened on my watch. I'm thrilled by that. But just so much good has happened in the last 10 years in our pension plan. So I just want to make that comment. And the CMERS thing, the reason we brought it up is the state and CMERS had identical plans years ago. The state then said, oh, it's too expensive to have defined benefit pension plans for all our employees. We're going to do a tiered system where it's partially DB, partially DC. They've gone to kind of a hybrid plan. Well, the towns that opted into CMERS, and I don't know how many there are, let's call it 50 or so.
I think they said it was 78.
78 are screaming bloody murder because the state has not allowed them to tier their plans. So, you know, obviously they're subject to market fluctuations. The state determines when their discount rate should go down and they just have to pay more into the plan. And so every year at CCM, and now I'm on the CCM Board of Directors, this is one of the policy things that we try to bring to the legislature. Please let these towns get into some tiered plans to give them some relief. There was something in the paper the other day, and I think the unions put out a statement saying, we oppose that. There's a shortage of workers, we need, I'm not gonna get into that, but I can tell you that the CEOs of the towns do not like the Seamers plan, and there was legislation at the state that came out, it is defeated, it is not going anywhere, that said every municipality must pay their firefighters and police exactly what the Seamers plan pays for the towns that are in Seamers. And that was a bill that was proposed this year. It either didn't get out of committee or got out of committee and died, whatever. I'm not sure what happened to it, but that is not happening this year. But that would change our police pension, and I don't know if it would apply to a volunteer municipal fire department. Anyway, so we were talking about this a little bit internally. We saw this article, brought it to your attention. We don't need to talk about it anymore. It's just a conversation piece.
Seamers, is that the old Murph?
Yes,
When did they change their name?
I don't know. I know it is Murph. I'm surprised I didn't say that. Murph.
You damn yourself.
Sure.
First been around a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no questions for the finance director, we will move on to this beginning discussion with the 23-24 budget.
Mr. Chairman, there's no intention to necessarily take on the budget tonight, it's just discussion.
I thought we'd handle questions tonight. And if we decide that we need to ask a department head or somebody to come in for our next meeting, and we would take action at our next meeting, that we would give us time to see where we want to go.
So you may be looking at the first meeting in April.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
What's by our rules,
Well,
is our date.
we have an end date. We don't have any other date. We have an end date where, we go to our annual town budget meeting, the first Monday in May. We have to advertise the budget before then, and that's usually done in the Harbor News, which requires some lead time.
Week or two, yeah.
I don't know if anybody saw, speaking of the Harbor News, and not to get into too much here. I don't know if you guys saw that Fenwick tried to do some controlling of Airbnbs or renting out their houses, and they have their own zoning board. So they passed a regulation. Were you guys familiar with this?
No.
So they said you cannot rent out a Fenwick home, so their own zoning commission, for less than 2 weeks, no more than 6 times a year, something along those lines. Because they want long-term rentals and they don't want it done all the time in Fenwick. Their zoning commission passed that. And they had to notify the public of it, and they published it in the Middletown Press. Well, the people who opposed that regulation appealed to the Superior Court and said,
Who gets that paper?
what?
Who gets
Nobody
that
gets
paper?
that paper. It's not adequate notice.
Mhm.
And the judge at the Superior Court agreed, and then Fenwick took an appeal to the appellate court, and the appellate court agreed because 0 people received Middletown Press. Now, I would go so far as to say that I'm not so sure how many people receive a physical copy of the Hartford Current. I get a digital copy. No, I know the person to my right does.
He likes to cross. You could probably go around town to all the people that get a paper copy.
But no, there's plenty of people who do. I mean, it's not, but I wonder what that number is. And where was I going? I was gonna bring this. Yeah, we have to publish it in the Harbor News. So we know the Harbor News goes to, thank you for bringing me back. We know the Harbor News goes to every household and every business. I would think that would be adequate notice. So we do need that. So putting the budget in the Middletown Press is likely not to be adequate notice for the town of Old Saybrook, likely. That has not been tested. Certainly, more people in the town of Old Saybrook get the Middletown Press than in the borough of Fenwick, which is 0. So it's more than 0, I'm sure. I'm not, the whole notice thing with newspapers is interesting now, because how do you determine that I get it? I live in Saybrook, I get it online. I don't know if they can determine that or not. I'm not sure. And same thing with the day and same thing with the register. So notice is an interesting issue. And of course, this year, legislation is making its way through, and we've been at CCM and cost promoting this for years. We should just be able to advertise on our town websites. And that should be adequate notice. So I don't know where that's going to go. We'll see. The governor actually proposed that this year, that the town should be able to do that for the first time. CCM has been proposing it for 10 years since I've been in office. Anyway, so yes, getting back to your question, we'd love to have it done by the first Tuesday in April. So that gives us a week and a half, because we need that lead time to get it into the Harbor News. And it has to be published a certain amount of days prior to the annual budget meeting, which is that Monday in May.
So then, yeah, I
Long
would
story long.
suggest that we plan on passing the budget at our next meeting, the first meeting in April. We ask whatever questions we need to ask tonight, and then before we move on to the next topic, we decide if we want to ask or we need to ask anybody into the next meeting. Okay? Okay, so we will start our discussion if anybody has any questions.
Given that our guests are here, I just have a couple of questions about Board of Ed budget. Actually, one, you already answered the one about the kindergarten teacher, and I appreciate that. But there's a policy question and a specific question. And the specific question is around the increases due to the reduction in title grant funding and the expiration of the guidance grant. And one was 51,000, the other one 61,000. But I guess there's a policy question in my mind, which is, the federal government has a lot of money and pays for a lot of good things, I am sure. We don't have as much money here. And so if the federal government funds a grant and then that grant expires, then I think, at least from my perspective, we need more information about what's actually going on with that grant and why it's important for the town to continue to fund it. So I don't know if you have the answers as you sit here today to be able to say on the title grant fund, this is how lack of that 51,000 would have an impact on education of our children. But I'd like that information before we vote on it.
Okay. So I'll start, and Pam can fill in the blanks here, but some of the grant money that we received, ESSER, ARP-ESSER, all the different funding that came down, we specifically worked on not putting things into the budget specifically that would need to be carried on, over the years. So we tried to use those as one-time expenditures. Some of the things we don't have control over are when our normal, I'll call them our normal special ed grants, the things that we get on an annual basis change, those entitlements change. And Pam can certainly give you the specifics of, what happens, but we don't have control often over, they just don't come out and say, a specific grant's being reduced by 20%. It's just kind of like they wipe their hands and we have to figure out how to fill the hole, so to speak. So, specifically, I don't know if you wanted to address those two.
So the Title I grant isn't a grant that's going to expire. It's been around 4 years. It's based on criteria of students who have remedial reading needs, in particular for Old Saybrook. And it's also comparative across the state. It's the amount of money that's available in comparison to the number of districts. We're fortunate or unfortunate because of our perceived wealth. And so therefore, we have a lot less money than many other districts. However, when they recalculated a handful of districts, ours was one of them this year, we went from 95,000 that we could use towards salaries for our teachers who give remedial reading instruction to our elementary school students. And those services haven't dropped relative to the amount of funding that they reduced. And when I develop the budget and I look at what our grant funds are going to be, we kind of hedge. And I will say we're going to get 85% of what we got this year to protect us so that we don't have to absorb a large, sudden, unknown decrease that we have to build into next year's budget to cover what we didn't know this year. This was very unexpected for Title I. It was $40,000, but it was almost half of that grant that we had received last year. So we, built in a little bit, but not enough to absorb that. And in that case, it wasn't a grant that we knew was going to expire. So those services are continuing, those needs are still there. The whole science of reading that's coming up with the state legislature that says our kids aren't reading well enough. There's no way that we would be able to reduce. We have 2 teachers, that's it, at the elementary school that focus on helping our students who are behind catch up. So unfortunately, that's not something we can be like, well, our needs have dropped, let's reduce the position because we've reduced funding. So that wouldn't work in that situation. In the, however much we received, 500 and another $800,000 in ESSER money, and all that ESSER money, the one position that we need to carry on is this one guidance position. And that's for an individualized special education program at the high school that addresses kids who are at risk of not finishing. So that guidance counselor works one-on-one with that group of kids and their families. And one of the big issues from COVID is getting kids back into the school, particularly sometimes high school kids who have struggled anyway, who wants to come back. And so we're working with those families, with those kids to keep them in school, get them educated so that they can be, productive once they graduate from the school. So that's the one position in a grant we knew was going to expire. And as Julie had stated, we were very careful about the rest of our initiatives, that they were as best as possible, things that weren't going to have to be taken on by the taxpayers on an ongoing basis moving forward. So for those 2 particular situations, that's the rationale.
So on the guidance grant, can that person, or will time work that person out of a job, or is this going to be going on?
So what happens is we have to weigh, the students that we keep in-house, and we really dwindled. When I first started here, we had probably 14, 15 outplaced students. We have 6, 7 maybe, it fluctuates a little bit. So in order to keep those kids in district, and it is way less expensive to educate them here than it is to send them out. Those types of positions that Pam just talked about, particularly that guidance position, allows us to do that. So is it something that we'll be able to get rid of at some point? It really depends on the nature of the severity, I would say, of those students.
The students and the programming, we are developing a program in-house to address it here. And that one position in particular doesn't even cover an outplaced tuition. So just having that one position in, keeping 4 or 5 kids in district, the value of having that versus paying tuition out for kids who might not be able to be successful here and who need to go outplaced. So that was the rationale that administration went through as to keeping the position. And again, with any of our programs, they develop over time based on the needs of the students.
And they do.
So, absolutely. And if that were to change and that wasn't needed, that would get changed either through attrition or through some other way.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but we try to look at what the cost would be if we had to, send students elsewhere. So that's, and we do educate 18 to 21-year-olds, and that 22-year-olds now. So that does help with that transition program as well. So it's multifaceted for sure.
Thank you.
Question I had asked Jan, well, I have to tell you guys now, is, what do we get in federal funds or state funds from all these initiatives that they're telling us that we need to do?
So far, so the one I think you're referring to is the science of reading. So ironically,
Well, I'm referring to everything. In other words, right now, we're being mandated by the state. What happens if we get a divorce from the state and say, keep your money, we're gonna run our school system like we'd like to?
well, it's certainly always a choice. I think the number of mandates since 2015 is 125 that we have experienced. The most recent one, and probably the most costly, actually, there's a bunch in the hopper. For instance, we're looking at all the regulations around HVAC and climate control, and that is going to be huge if that comes down. It's based on temperatures in buildings. I mean, it's crazy. They're talking about, if those of you that were involved in education in the late 80s, there was something called the Enhancement Act, which raised the starting salaries. That's coming back around again. They're looking at the starting salaries, like so many professions where we can't attract people. They're talking about boosting the starting salaries. Well, that boosts everybody's salaries, because obviously if you're boosting the beginner salaries, everybody else along the ladder is going up as well. So those kinds of mandates,
So I got a two-part question. How much money do we get from the state I'm told that the federal money comes through the state. So how much money are we getting from the state? And then how much of all these programs costing us that maybe we wouldn't really initiate or have if we didn't have to do it?
well,
And I'm hearing that there's some schools down south of Connecticut that are considering doing this, that they're gonna say, keep your money, we're gonna run our schools the way we want it.
well, that's certainly, we'd have to go through, Brad, and look at, those types of things. And a good example of that is the science of reading. We happen to, in Old Saybrook, do a very good job with our reading scores,
Number 16, correct?
14.
14, okay.
And so to say that, the state everybody has to adopt one of these 6, programs seems crazy to us. So there is a big fight going on. But at the end of the day, if we have to do that, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. The $100,000 that we're going to use to pilot is just before we even get to buying the new reading program. And yet our kids do well with the curriculum and the adoption that we currently use. So we have to look at all of those.
Is that a mandate that's already happened or it's in the hopper?
It's in the hopper.
Do you know is it regulatory or legislative?
Well, it's legislative, and it's, so right now they're asking for a waiver. I think that's what,
That's what I was gonna
Well,
ask.
it's not for a year, 24.
that's just a waiver to, from 2024 to 2025. We still have to pilot at least a couple of these 6 programs before the waiver takes effect. So either way, you have an expenditure to purchase the materials that we're going to need to look at those 1 or 2 programs that we want to look at. Even if they kick the can down the road another year, then we have to adopt it. So it's really just pushing the financial piece down a little bit for the adoption of the plan.
Wasn't the waiver also for, depending upon where your numbers were at with your students? Wasn't that a consideration with
Nope.
regards to the waiver?
It's not. They're
So what good you've done really doesn't make a difference.
that's just it. Here we are, like I said, we've done very, very well. And yet we're going to be forced to pick one of the 6 programs. And by the way, maybe you remember, it's a very, very low number of districts within the entire state that even use any of these. I want to say it's like a handful,
Yeah.
a dozen or
It's a
so.
small amount. It's not the majority of the state. Everyone would have to, for the most part, adopt something new,
Right.
whether their current program is working or not.
Yeah,
So they're gonna come up with, I was told, 5 new programs.
6.
6, okay, 6. So, but nobody knows how much they're gonna cost yet.
Well, we know for Old Saybrook, approximately, depending on which one we adopt, it will be it will be significant. It will be, who knows, 2 years from now, because as we know, prices are pretty hard to predict. It's gonna be, you know, in the hundreds of thousands.
And in next year's budget, we have $30,000 to train our staff
PD.
members how to use what we're piloting. And $70,000 to get the materials for the students to use
So
the
how,
piloted programs.
so how do you know what's the best program? If there's 5 programs.
So our experts, our teachers who are experts, our first grade teachers who are teaching emergent readers, and our 2 specialists that Pam talked about earlier that work with our remedial students. Our experts will look at all of these and they will, you know, they'll go through criteria and they'll figure out which one makes the most sense. I don't think we're gonna get rid of, and Janet, you know, she could probably answer this better than anyone, but I don't think we'll get rid of everything that we're doing, because obviously the things we're doing are working. It's just a matter of we have to adopt one of these other 6 programs.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know all this mandate stuff. What does it cost for the town? And then forget their money. How would it work out? And it'd be almost like a charter school of Old Saybrook.
Charter school. Well, they still have to follow the rules too.
Yeah, but they have to follow all these rules of these mandates and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the regulations they're trying to pass is they can't do a unfunded mandate. Whether or not that passes or not.
Yeah, that would really be something to see.
Yeah.
That will really be something to see.
I think
Probably die on the vine.
we should secede.
Yeah.
The town of Old Saybrook.
Right,
Yes.
that's what I said. We'll be on our own.
Should be independent.
They'll be lining up to live here.
We'll become a sovereign nation.
There you go.
Let's just become
We've got
sovereign.
a port, we're on the ocean.
Team Carl.
Queen Leanne.
If nobody else has.
Yeah, one question while you've got her. You discussed the program you have in place for those teachers that get the degrees and how much money you have set aside every year. Can you go over that a little bit again? Because
So in part of the negotiations, this goes back, I want to say 2 or 3 contracts, probably 3 contracts ago. We set a flat amount. So I think it's 20,000, 24,000.
I think it's $22,000 a year.
Okay,
It's
so
a pool of money.
that's it. So what happens is, say we have, I don't know, 10 teachers or 12 teachers that are going through the degree program. They apply for that money and they get a portion. And I mean, it's based on the UConn rate that they get reimbursed, and it's up to 2 courses a year, I believe.
They get up to $950 for 2 courses a year. That is completed in that fiscal year. And they have to give us grades as well. So it has to be, I think, a year better.
Yeah. And so $1,900, say, you know, you're enrolled, you get your 2 courses. When that money is gone, so it goes by whoever gets their letter in first. It's, you know, we take the letters in from each person that applies. When the money's gone, it's gone.
Right, so also you mandate, I believe, they want them to have their master's degree within 10
So
years.
that's the state, in order to keep your certification. So when all of us started, I'm a certified administrator, you have to get, your beginning certification, we'll call it, to make it simple. And then you have 10 years to get your master's. And that's standard for every teacher that holds Connecticut certification.
And we do have it graded that if you have a bachelor's and you're working on your master's, you get priority to those funds.
Yes.
As opposed to someone who has a master's and is going for a second master's, or what in
Right.
education they call a 60 year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those who have to get their master's get an opportunity for the money first. We have not had a year where we've maxed out. So we've come close.
Yeah.
And so we've had to wait till the end of the year to see everything that comes in, and we do that. But as a matter of course, any teacher's contract I've ever seen, and I know there was a question at the meeting, there has always been a differentiation in salary based on degree.
Yeah.
And generally it's bachelor's, master's, a second master's or a 6th year, And then there's some, and for us, if it's a doctorate, it's a small amount above that. It's not a whole pay scale, it's a stipend on top of it.
How is your budget looking this year to the end of the year?
So I think, we've definitely got a salary deficit. Pam and I just ran the numbers. And as you know, we don't purchase a lot of our technology or our capital till we get to the springtime. And I think, right now, we're certainly gonna come out in the black, but, we're close this year because we have about $125,000 deficit in salaries right now.
Those things that we've been talking about that we had to incorporate.
Right. But, other than that, we've held pretty true to most of our other accounts. We don't have any major overruns. Special ed is about break even right now. So, I don't like to say it too loudly
Why do you wait till spring for your electronics?
because we have nowhere else to go. Should we have a special ed student that moves in and costs us $200,000? We have nowhere to go to get that money.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's just, we don't have another account that we can pull it from. So the safeguard,
So it's,
basically read for us.
if in worst case, a 3-year replacement cycle might have to stretch to a 4-year. We prefer not, because the life expectancy, we all know of electronics these days is not what we'd like it to be. But that's what gives us the room. It's not ideal. It's not part of our plan.
I just see some towns, we talked about it before, that are going to the lease programs that are coming available, and I didn't know if you've looked at
So
those.
we, when I first started, we did have some leases, and the problem with a lease, and our Board of Education in particular has a philosophy that they don't want to obligate future boards for that kind of money, because we never know if the funding is going to be there. And now that we're 1-to-1, Rick, it's a much bigger number. So what we try to do is a rotation. We're trying to do a certain amount each year so that it doesn't strap, the budget in any one given year. And so far, that's worked pretty well for us.
And to lease something that, right now they're Chromebooks.
Yeah, they
$200
would
or $300
not work.
to lease something, and when they're all protected. If they get damaged, they go out, they get repaired, and they come back. And if they're unrepairable, they might get $18, $20, because it's one of the ones that's 3 years old. So to lease something that's not gonna have a value at the end of the lease doesn't seem to make it was different when we had desktops and bigger things that were going to have a longer lifetime.
We used to be able to buy them out at the end of the lease for $1.
Mhm.
And then we probably kept them another 2 or 3 years. We would keep our not laptops so much, but our desktops 6 years, 5, 6, 7 years sometimes. So it made sense, but it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense for us.
John, did you have a question? Yeah. Hi, Julie, I just have a question. I'm trying to understand the grant process on a couple of sheets that were handed out at the town meeting. And you had $1.5 million over a 3-year cycle of fiscal 22 to 24.
Yeah.
And I think I read where you get grants of 900,000 a year. Is that true? Or over 3 years?
I don't know what that would be referring to. We don't get any grants. I
You
wish
don't
we
get
did.
any grants
I wish
outside of the
For
3 year.
capital?
Excuse me?
Were you talking specifically capital purchases?
No, I'm just talking about grants in general.
Okay,
You have $1.5 million over 3 years on this introduction.
that was the ARP and ESSER funds, I think you were looking
It's
at.
ESSER,
Yeah,
Right,
yes,
those are
those are all going away.
they're all going away.
Yeah,
That's their.
we just gave you that so you could see where we got those funds over that 3-year period and where they were being spent.
So the 112,000 that Bruce was referring to with the 51 and 61,000 that you were short on the grant, that was part of that funding?
Split. One was.
One wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So off the top of my head, this year we're getting 54,000 for Title I.
Yeah.
So all of the grants I'm gonna mention are 2-year grants. However, we are to spend about 90% of them in the first year, and we make that benchmark. So Title I this year is 54,000. Special education is 268,000. Pre-K is 9,000. Title III is 10,000. And some of those monies do go to private schools, a small amount, so it's negligible. And we have a Title IIA grant, that's about $18,000. Those are our regular grants that we get every year that last over 2 years. So not significant. And the majority of those grants, we do spend towards salaries.
Okay. Do you, when you do your budget, you project out your grant receipts for the fiscal year?
Yeah, we net them out of the budget.
In the sense of transparency, I would ask that you actually have that as part of the process. In other words, when you do the budget, if your budget is $31 million and you get $2 million projected in grants, can that be shown in your budget process?
We could make a slide that would include that, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can't understand.
We don't get that much. I mean, you just heard the
No, I
whole
know,
amount.
I know.
We probably get 300 and,
But what we
Well, the
do,
$1,000,005 got me thinking.
yeah, that wasn't enough.
when I do develop the budget and we enter every single entry into the accounting system line by line, you know, French books this much, I will put salaries for elementary school teachers, the full amount, and then I put anticipated Title I grant at 85%, and then I take it out. So when we print out our detail, we have that.
They don't see
I know
that.
they don't see
Yeah.
that, but I want you to understand that when we build it, that's how we build it. So we do have that information available and we can
Yeah.
easily
We
put it
can,
together.
we can provide that for you for sure.
Okay.
And then, of course, grants come along, you know, one of them that I know Rick was interested in was that safety and security grant. There have been multiple rounds of that grant, multiple rounds. We're still waiting for that project to be completed and paid, and then we'll submit for some reimbursement, and that'll go back to the town. So those kinds of grants, I call them the one-offs, you know, those are kind of outside of what Pam just sort of summarized. The grants that she just summarized are the grants that each year we get, but every year they seem to be less and less and less. They're diminishing.
In the town. Similar to the town.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
No,
else?
thank you. Those are really good points.
Just, one question, I'm gonna put my ARPA hat on for a second. You probably have heard that we had the, youth leagues in to talk to, ARPA about funding. And one of the key issues that they raised was the sliding door, in the
I'm
gymnasium.
well aware.
They mentioned your name, as a matter of fact. Very positive, very. But I noticed that you've got that as a $30,000 item, 25 to 29. And I guess the question really is, from your perspective, high enough priority to get it done. Clearly, the basketball league thinks this is a key priority for them.
So Bruce, for 25 years, we've never closed that door for the basketball leagues. But all of a sudden, they feel that that's really important. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but we're very careful because we have doors now that are closed, electronically versus manual.
Right.
That $30,000 would put a curtain up. It's not gonna put a door. It's gonna be, it's not gonna do what they want it to do. And what they want to do is they want some soundproofing. The curtains divide the gym, but they're mesh on top. The sound does go through. It does help with a division of the gym to give them, a side for two teams to practice. And we've been talking about it. I know I've talked with a number of the basketball people. At some point, the doors we have, they're old.
Yeah.
And we take care of them and we're careful with them, and our custodians open and close them so nobody, pushes the button, and if it gets hung up on the track, all of a sudden your track is offline and nothing works. I'm looking at evaluating whether or not it makes sense to replace the motor and the track for these doors. They're very heavy. They're wonderful for the purpose that they serve. But at some point, we may not be able to afford to keep those doors in place. We have one at the high school and one at the middle school. But I am aware, we've had some conversations and they're, you know, I understand what they're trying to do. And I know that the Park and Rec gym here has just the curtain that comes down. It's a way to divide the gym. It's not perfect.
So what the guy was talking about was, I think, fifth and sixth graders and seventh and eighth graders. Why don't they do two different nights?
We give them 5 nights as it is, so they can use those nights, you know,
Wow.
we give them Monday through Friday. And they don't have to pay a nickel because the custodians are there. And I mean, it's just, you know, we're a small town and we just don't have a lot of fields and or gym space. I mean, it's difficult, I get it, because there's a lot of teams vying for the same space. You know, so it's tough. You should see, I probably spent, I don't know, hour and a half today on fields and who could be where and whether there was a conflict. And I mean, they're already vying for, you know, we have the Ticks and we have all the youth leagues and I mean, enough to make you crazy.
Julie, aren't those doors original?
They are.
Just,
You can't buy them like that anymore.
Good job.
I hate to be their only phone.
We really
Yeah.
have nursed them. We really have.
I just have one question. At one of your past presentations, you said your insurance consortium will put a line item in, but that you would have a better idea what that number would be.
Yeah, so, we actually have a meeting on Thursday. We haven't changed the projection from the 5%. I just commented to Pam like 2 days ago. So we're all in the consortium together. There's a bottom line on the surplus or the, you know, it's really the reserve for the consortium. It's amazing how in a month things can swing. I mean, Old Saybrook, if we look at us separately, which we try to, our philosophy is we're in this together, that we don't try to separate us out. However, we had almost $500,000 in claims in the month of February. We don't know why. Our premium's $165,000 that we pay in, and we had almost $500,000 in claims. So the pendulum can swing so quickly. To answer your question, Paul, I don't know that we're gonna have a very big difference from where we are.
Will you have that number by, within 2 weeks when we have our next meeting?
The rate doesn't usually get set till the end of April, but I can push on Thursday and see if I can get a little closer maybe,
Okay.
see what I can come up with. I mean, everybody has to agree, so it's not just me.
Do you know what your mod rate is based upon the insurance claims?
What are what?
Your mod rate, it's how they predict your,
They go by I think that what you're asking is, they go by the state, I can't think of the word.
Incurred.
Not the incurred, you're
No.
not talking about incurred claims.
no,
He's talking about like what the projected,
yeah, they rate you based upon a mod rate for you to be able to be determined as far as what your futures look like based upon your past.
well, what they do for us, it's a little different than that. They don't use a mod rate, they use 12 rolling months of claims. We're self-insured, so they look at a 12-month rolling period. So in that 12 months, they can rate us and they project for that year. So let's say we say to, we have Anthem, we say to Anthem, you know, next month, we want you to project where we're, you know, where our rate is. They give us what we call it's a stop loss for the aggregate of the group. And let's say, for simplicity's sake, it's $10 million. We know that in that contract year, that anything over $10 million goes into the pool. We don't pay the claims beyond that 10 million. So it's rated different than what you're talking about. When we look at what our projected increase is going to be, it's usually against what the state average is for a much bigger pool than just the Old Saybrook.
Yeah,
There's no mod rates.
they would have to have a mod rate in order to Am I off kilter here? And you know what I'm talking about.
We have it, our consultants to
Right.
take a look at all those.
But
things.
you're not self-insured, aren't you
Right.
fully
We're not.
insured?
Only insured with our dental
Yeah.
plan.
Two different
And
things,
so
that's
it's,
why.
I'm not sure, I don't know how theirs works.
For workman's comp?
There's moderate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're-
but they're,
yes,
they're in that, yeah. But you're asking, they're talking about health
Health
insurance.
insurance, right?
I thought you were talking about claims when you were talking about claims.
But
Health
Health insurance.
not workers' comp.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, what the heck? I was thinking everybody being
No,
sick.
we're
and-
the same-
Okay,
Yeah, we're the
Okay.
same group for
So
workers'
we're
comp.
going health insurance.
No.
We were talking
No.
health insurance.
I'm going like, holy. crap, those-
I'm thinking to myself,
No,
moderates health insurance, but I didn't want to like,
I misunderstood.
no, Paul was asking about health insurance and I thought you were following up with a question.
I mean, look. If, 5%, nobody wants a budget to go up 5%, but 5% for health insurance, I think we're all like. You know,
Trend is like 10%.
I would sign
That's the
up,
word
I mean,
keep thinking.
we're gonna be in that neighborhood, you know. If they come in at 4%, you know, it's like, I wouldn't even touch the budget because you never know what's gonna happen, so. I mean, I forgot what it was, I didn't realize it was at 5%, but, no, that's a hell of a renewal. We would all sign up for that for the next 10, if you told me 10 years in a row, we could go up 5%, you know. be
Sign
great,
me up, lock me
right?
down.
Right?
We've averaged in the consortium, we've averaged over the past 10 years about 2.3% a year. So it's
Yeah.
definitely worked in our favor and we just picked up. Region 17 is joining us, that's 230 contracts. And Westbrook, I believe, is gonna join us. So the pool's getting bigger, which should help us as far as overall claims.
That's
Yeah.
a theory the state works by. too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, yeah, until you look at their history and.
No, we look at that before we take them in.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they have to fit kind of our, yeah, and we're all pretty small.
Okay.
And so, everybody has to kind of be in a similar situation. We don't necessarily, when they're getting a 25% increase from their carrier, it's not the time to come into our consortium, the time to come in is when you're trending pretty well.
What we did on the town side recently, I did, and is I reached out to our broker and I said. So the state has their state partnership plan. They also are introducing a new plan with stripped down. They're stripping out some, not coverage, but places where you can go for treatment. So it's a little more limited as to where you can go. And it's like partnership minus 10%. That's not what they're calling it, but essentially the rate they project to be 10% less than what the partnership is requiring its members to pay. So I had Chuck at Brown and Brown, I said, Chuck, if I can save 150 grand on insurance this year, run me the partnership numbers, even though we've done so much work over the years in getting to health savings accounts and getting deductibles up. And the state plan is more of a preferred provider option. The state partnership plan is significantly more expensive than our plan, apples to apples, if we were to just switch over. And the minus 10% plan is still about $120,000 more. Did I send that to you? Did I send what Chuck said?
I think you did,
It's
yes.
about $120,000 more than what we're currently paying in premium. So, when we go into negotiations, the unions frequently say, we want you to, they prefer the state plan. We want you to price out the state plan. Well, I did it this year proactively, just to see where are we? Where do we stand? And are we overpaying? And, if we were, then I would have swallowed what we've done over the last 10 years and gone into it if it was saving a significant amount of money, but those aren't the numbers we got. Anyway, health insurance is tough. I mean, it can.
In the state plan, the downside of the state plan is you have no say over what they decide that plan is gonna look like. There's no options. That's something that's hard when you're dealing with 4 or 5 unions, when you're trying to get everybody to come on board and we-
Towns are now coming out of the state.
Oh,
plan.
yes, they
They're
are.
committed Once you commit to it, you're commit at, you
2
commit for at
So
least
many
2
years.
years.
Yeah.
But some rounds are coming out because the premiums have
Huge
gone
increases.
up a lot more. Anyway, we don't have to go on that.
Does anybody else have anything?
For education or otherwise.
Education.
Nope.
Do we think that we need somebody back here with us in 2 weeks?
No.
Anybody?
Is there anything else that you want from us? Those were great questions you asked tonight. There's anything else? I know that. There was I gave you some reports, I think that you had requested a while back.
Yep.
When did you say to have them come back 2 weeks?
What's that?
I asked Tim if it would be safe to have you come back in 2 weeks.
Plan.
Is it safe? I don't know.
For who?
Well, yeah, that was my question. Does anybody want them?
Why don't, if anybody wants them back, why don't you just email the chairman?
Okay,
What's your address?
and not before 9 AM in the morning.
Nine?
My phone started dinging at 5 of 8 this
It's
morning.
outrageous.
Because I hadn't
Earlier
checked
than
my email, so she was stating.
Yeah, I know, because he doesn't pay attention to anything.
All right, let's
Move on.
let's keep getting tired.
Okay.
5:30.
We're still on the budget topic,
Yes,
so if
yeah.
anybody has any other,
I wanted to talk to the board about the capital projects or the projects that we put forth every year. And ask for consensus of whether or not it would be worth before funds are issued, that we get to see the 3 bids that are given. And once we concur with, based upon the bids, then the money's sent or spent. Just to get an idea that, you know, of what kind of money we're looking at, what kind of history is being looked at, and shopping, I guess, and I'm not just saying fiscal, I'm just for everybody. So we have a little more of an idea of what that process really looks like and what those bids actually look at that everybody else sees but us, and we're the ones paying the bills.
I'm more concerned about that there's not always 3 bids.
Well, that would also make it.
That's what's bothering me.
Yeah, so sometimes what I've instructed, because something John brought up years ago, and it's
12 years ago.
and it's been brought up periodically. When there is a project that's over a certain price, I'll say to somebody or one of the directors, you're gonna have to bid this. And they might say, well, I'm not gonna be able to, how am I gonna get 3? And I say, if you don't think you can get 3, publish it. I mean, it's the safest way to do it. If you get one, you know, you can solicit and publish at the same time. So solicit your bid that you want your preferred vendor to do. And if you get nobody else to respond, then you've satisfied the requirement of a bid and you've just gotten one response. We have an RFP out right now. We're probably gonna get 2, it looks like, for Mayor's Way. You know, some of the jobs involve several different types of things like plumbing, a little bit of electric and a little carpentry. Under 10,000, in theory, we can sole source, not in theory, but we can according to the charter. And then above that, technically we should be soliciting. So that is the general instruction.
But it's not always followed.
People are pretty good. I mean,
I just think the board, we should be seeing everything just to make sure
so
that
I have.
3 bids are done.
I think to me, there's a difference between seeing the bids and seeing the information. For instance, if we go and do the, you know, the HVAC on the roof, I'm not sure it's gonna be at all useful for me to wade through, you know, pages and pages of mechanical information that I don't understand. But having somebody come in with a 1-pager that says, you know, here's basically the bid information that we got, that's really the financial information. To me, that would be useful.
Well, whoever's putting the bid out, I would expect to come in and say, listen, I got 3 bids. This is the one I want to go with based upon this information, explain it to us, but
Yeah,
to verify
But
that they do that.
I don't want to know all the details of the bid.
Well, I think you should show it to us that he did it, or she, or whoever, just to verify it,
It's actually, the detail is actually in.
where you make the difference.
What would you call it?
Proposal.
Proposal that we made and was approved by this board years ago. That not only the finances had to be involved, but all the materials and the cost of the materials and the cost of labor. And I think it should be there, whether we look at it or not, it should be presented. That's not only my opinion.
Yeah, typical example, Bruce, was last week at ARPA funds. They come in for a price on the driveway. They got a bid from last April, it was 22. Now they want to double it, and they're asking us for money, and they don't know how much it's gonna cost. And it's just,
And there's
No, that's-
plenty of contractors. Yeah.
One of the things that John mentioned, in addition to the things he just mentioned, was also a completion date.
Well, that's
When
what
these
started the
projects are
whole
gonna be
thing.
completed.
Yeah. So there's no objection to that. I mean, it's really following town charter. And I have said to folks when they say, there's no way I'm gonna get 3 bids on this. I'm like, safest way is to put it in the Harbor News. And you'll get no bids. Maybe you just get your 1 bid and then you're done. You've satisfied the bid requirement. Because there's only so much you can do.
I just put 3 bids in the paper. This is a perfect example to kind of where you're going. 1 bid is for paved, ceiling parking lots, because that's now up over $20,000. I've had 2 people respond, asking for the specs. The other is for painting the gym. And I have 2 for that. And the third one is for replacing the service counter in one of the cafeterias. I have one that I sent it to, and I've had no other response.
I mean,
It's so hard. People are just, and then a lot of the things that we might bid, if they're on state contract, we go through state contract.
and
We
that's.
do a
another
lot
thing.
through state contract.
We'll go to the DAS website.
Yeah, there's a lot on there.
Yeah, and not even just DAS, there's PEPM, there's a bunch of contracts. The lights were on a contract.
Yeah, and then the CROG, Capital Region Council of Governments,
Yep.
they have a whole, in fact, they called me about a week ago. They said for $150, it's a membership. So when we have a painting job, we can select this guy. It's it's already bid. Is that okay?
Well, as long as it meets the requirements of the charter, I guess, is the big question.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as, I just think that we should be seeing more of these as they come through to ensure that, the monies that we're approving, all we're doing is putting a lump sum in.
Yep.
But, surprisingly enough, they asked for 20,000 and then the bid comes in at 15. Well, where's the other 5 go?
So I would agree with you that you should be satisfied that projects are being competitively bid. You should be satisfied. I have no issues with that. Taxpayer dollars.
No, that's, yeah. I don't think it's a lot to ask for what we're doing.
Yeah, it's,
Knowing that there's gonna be exemptions, and I get that.
well, exactly.
Exemptions because there's nobody else available.
Yeah. And we do use the DAS website, so. Now that's, even if they remove the paper requirement for advertising. Although that's more for town meetings and things like that, but we always put stuff on our town website, the DAS website, and we bid it sometimes. And the DAS website is what generates the information.
Well, what brought this whole thing up, in all honesty, was when we discussed how they put in, what was it, for police car to outfit? It was like, what was it, $17,000
Yeah, there was.
per vehicle?
Yeah. The car plus the outfitting.
Yeah, so the outfitting was 17,000 per vehicle. You're talking 10 vehicles, you're up to $170,000. And they give it to somebody that wasn't even within the state that did it. So, I mean, I would have liked to see I mean, there's plenty of contractors on the state bid that do it. There's a guy local that's on the state bid that does it. None of that got put through like it should have, in my opinion. No disrespect to the chief, I just feel that that should have been, you know, that's low hanging fruit in my eyes.
So I'm happy to do that, to satisfy you with projects that are approved by this board, that go to referendum and are approved, to satisfy you that the project has been bid appropriately. And however however you're satisfied, I'm happy to do
No,
it.
that's fine.
No.
You know, I just think that I think John, like I said, I think we should be made aware of it.
So HVAC, by the way, came up. That truly is a placeholder at this point. We're still,
Oh, it could go
Fumbling.
all over the place.
we're fumbling around the edges on that.
Get ready. All I
Yeah.
can say on that.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had these folks in from Eversource, a consultant. I don't think they've gotten back to us yet. They went over to your place too, the guy from Eversource. So, you know, that's gonna be just publicly bid, at some point. The number in the budget is a placeholder. If you don't want to put it in there, we can do it after the fiscal year and go to town meeting, you know, either way. But it was a number that Dan received from our current HVAC provider saying that's a pretty good ballpark number. So that's what we put in.
So it's really a guesstimate.
Professional.
It's probably within 20% on either side, I'd say. You know, and depending on availability.
So then if you put it in the budget, then at some point it will go out to bid, hopefully.
It will.
Okay, and then at that point, I think he's asking for us to be able to review
Right. Before the money's spent.
Review what? The RFP or the responses?
The response.
It's fine. I'll show you the bid. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carl, is that for a whole new system? So you'll probably run into what we did. We bid, you know, for Goodwin. And I called people I didn't even know, trying to get somebody else to bid. And the project was too big for most of them, and most of them didn't want any part of it because they can't get the
Parts.
materials. It was like pulling teeth. I mean, New England Mechanical was the only one that in the end bid, and, you know, they do wonderful work, but it's hard right now to get anybody.
It's an interesting environment. It is, I mean, for anything, painting, a lot
Who is
of
the company? Is it New England that you use here?
New England what? New England Energy Contractors. What we're using.
It's different from. who we
Yeah.
use it.
You use Emcor still?
We use them.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm been around a long time.
yeah. Anyway. Okay,
I'm just, whatever.
no, it's not an issue. Whatever needs to be done is fine.
Okay.
Any other budget questions?
I want to bring up the fire marshal car. I'd like to postpone that purchase this year for $45,000. We just put new tires on the car. Just spent over $4,000 repairing the air conditioning system, which to me looked like a complete do-over. The car's only got 65,000 miles on it. And I think that we could postpone that purchase for a year. He's the only person driving it. And I gotta believe it's in excellent condition. And
Do we know what the downside of doing that is?
well, I think that the car is, proposed at 45,000, but then you gotta spend the money to either move or get new radios and new lights and paint job. So the 45 becomes probably 55 to be modest. And it's unnecessary with 64,000 miles on the vehicle that just got brand new tires. And just had a lot of work done to it at that point. The only work I can see needs to be done in the next year. It's had new batteries in less than 2 years. The only thing I can see that might need to be done is the brakes. If it's done rather quickly, it'll only be pads. If he waits too long, he'll have to get rotors. And then other than that, the car should be in good shape. And mechanically, being the only driver, there's no need of it. I've checked with professionals and they say there's no reason why that vehicle can't go 130, 140,000 miles with a single driver. And, I just think that we need to, be conservative. And I would like to see in the future, perhaps that vehicle is purchased with the fleet and then maybe rotated every 8 years as part of the fleet program, just like the chief's car. The chief just turned his car in actually 10 years, 10 years old, 2012, but he got 2011. So I think that, it should become part of the fleet as a purchase and then,
This is kind of consistent.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that's, and I don't think even the fire marshal has a particular objection to that. I mean, I think he stated at the meeting that he would prefer to maybe switch it out, get more value out of the older car, but I don't think he has any issues driving that car another year.
Yeah, well, that's
I don't
a
think.
poor reason to sell a car is because of what.
Yeah, right.
Next year, I mean, you can say that about anything.
Is there an issue about capacity in the car, that what he was looking for was bigger?
No. No, he
Room, he was looking for
Well-
more room.
did mention the Suburban, but then when I asked about a Suburban, he said Suburban Tahoe, they're probably about the same price, and
It's not far off.
yeah,
Okay.
so that's.
The other thing I'd like to, go ahead.
Right, I'm all about
Just to your point, just so you know, I did a little research and I think you're gonna find that the police department's going through a above average amount of tires on those Tahoes too. Because in talking to other departments that have gone to the bigger ones, they're chewing up tires a lot quicker than they were with the smaller vehicles, just so you're aware. For all of us are aware.
Well, the cars we got right now, presently, the cruisers, I feel as though they're, sagging in the back a little bit.
A lot of equipment in the back of them.
I'm not sure if it should be looked into, that they might need heavy duty springs or shocks or something.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, what he's saying is right, the tires are gonna wear out faster.
Brad, do you have any idea what the average mileage is on cars that are driven by the fire marshals? What time frame they get rid of them? 70,000, 50,000?
Well, I've been told by experts that the car should last
They what?
130, 140,000 miles.
Really?
Yes,
That particular.
that particular car for the
Not
usage.
the fire marshal.
Not fire marshals.
No, look, you said the fire marshal's car.
The problem
Hard
is,
to believe
yeah,
they would last that long.
the problem that you're gonna run into, to your point, John, is depending upon, is it a full-time fire marshal, part-time fire marshal? Is he part of the fire department, so he goes to every fire?
Yeah.
It's so all over the board, in all honesty.
Very true.
It's very difficult to,
You
and,
can't compare that car to a car in Bridgeport or in London.
well, and the driver too. You know, he's an ex-cop. Do I need to say anything more?
You're saying that's a positive.
Sure. And I know we're seeing that, he'll be watching this, but yeah.
Anyway, I know.
I'm
So
not-
you're gonna bring that up at the next meeting.
Yes.
I just want to suggest something. If anyone has specific line item changes, if you could just, doesn't have to be typed or anything, but just print it out one copy so that our clerk will be able to, she won't have to. And we'll vote on your line item changes one at a time. And does any,
So, as the chairman knows, I've had a bit of a dialogue with the chief over some budget questions. Of the 9 questions, about 4 have been answered, 5 still not, and unfortunately, he's been too busy to answer the other one. So I just kind of letting this board know. I didn't send the questions out to the full board because in checking with Freedom of Information, I was concerned that if we began having a discussion, that would be a meeting. And so but Paul's aware of it. And so I think it's great that we have 2 more weeks, give the chief a chance to be able to respond to the remaining questions. And then my sense of it is at the end of the day with budgets, ultimately everything comes out in the wash, but I don't have the numbers yet for them to be able to know that.
Can you share the 5 questions that he hasn't answered?
Sure, I'll share all nine, because they're fairly quick. One is that I was looking for what the expenditures in his additional hours and his extra personnel are for. He sent me the budget that he gave to the police commission, and the extra personnel account. The use of that money is to pay for those officers that are backfilling when an officer, is, so if he has a complement of 25, if that 25 isn't there and there's a backfill, he uses the money not out of the regular account, but out of this extra personnel account. Don't know yet how much comes out of that on an annual basis, whether there's anything else that comes out of that account. The current budget, or proposed budget, does reflect that he's got 100% of his patrol officers filled for the entire year. Over the past 5 years, I asked how often does the Department of Police Services have been a full complement, and the answer is none. Since March of 2022, we hired an officer at a step above the first step in the pay grade. He hasn't responded.
The answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
We've hired, you may know that, levels, yeah.
And I'm interested in what that amount is. How many officers are currently going through the academy? The answer to that is 3. And then the kind of sub question to that was, are they being paid while they're at the academy from the regular employees account or from a different account?
The answer is yes, they're being paid, and it's coming out of the salary line.
Okay.
51, the one you have the number down there, 51610.
Okay. Then on the holiday replacement account, it's over the last 3 years on the actuals, it's been relatively small amount of money, but it's up to 55,000 this year. Don't know why we would have that jump this year. Same thing on, in the legal services account, he's been, the 27,000, 30,000, 48,000. They're over 39,000 this year. But he's still continuing to budget at 7,000. I'm just wondering whether maybe we should change that budget. Fuel account, the same thing. Right now they're $25,000 over the 40,000 that was budgeted this year, and he's budgeting 48,000 again next year.
On the fuel account, if I may comment, this Board of Finance has approved a process where at the end of the year, we go through outside services, and based on the hours that the vehicles are used, that we reimburse the town, and the monies from that go toward the fuel account, a little bit towards the salary account. So we under budget, knowing that we're going to get more money at the end of the fiscal year.
So where does that show? I mean, how does that get?
The transfer.
To transfer at the end of the year, so.
Yeah, I've seen that transfer, but then for your end of year budget, then it doesn't come back into the fuel account to show that it evens out, because right now, because the fuel account.
It will at the end of the year, so I could give you, last year, well, you probably have it in this account. But yes, so we don't know exactly what the amount's gonna be, because it depends on how much work they do. And
So the fuel account is solely for private activity?
no, the fuel account is for, but they are using the vehicles. So the whole premise of the Board of Finance policy was you're using town vehicles. Obviously, the officers are getting paid out of that account and being paid by the contractor, but they're also charging the contractor for the use of the cars, and then that money comes back to the town based on all of the hours. So let me just see if I can find this here. So fuel, the budget.
Because it just shows 40,000 budgeted,
Right,
40,000 actual, all the way across the board. And that doesn't make sense to me, given what you just said.
And then the other, so what, well, yes, but we put it back and top it to 40,000, and then also some of it goes to salaries, and then some of it also goes to vehicle maintenance. We put it between those three. And so there's vehicle maintenance here. repair and maintenance. I'll get you that information. Bruce.
Okay. Okay.
And I know exactly where the monies went for every single year and into which accounts.
Right, I just want to make sure, in the world of balance of the universe, there's probably 75 to $100,000 of excess in the personnel line, because we've effectively double counted between having 100% budgeted of regular employees and a separate line that pays for employees that are stepping in for when a regular employee is not there. And so you've got a double count there.
Well, an officer who gets their regular salary is going to be paid out of the regular salary account. And then if somebody's not there, or they're covering a vacation day or a sick day, that officer comes in at time and a half. So we are paying extra. We're not, it's not a double count.
That's not the way in which it was described. That would fall under the additional hours account. When he described the extra personnel account, that's not the way he described it. Yeah, so under additional hours, yes, that's where you get the time and a half and those kind of things. But this particular account is not.
Which account are you referring to?
It's called extra personnel,
Extra personnel.
and it's 51613.
I'll check that. But I think it works that way, but.
Okay, well, it could be that description, which is one of the reasons why I asked for the information in writing, so that it's easy to, easier to understand when you can see it in writing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are the questions. Hopefully he'll be able to answer. Thank you, Leanne, for your answers. And so if I get the answers, I certainly don't have any need to have the chief or anybody from the police commission in 2 weeks.
You mentioned reimbursement on the cars. I think we get $16 an hour for that. Do you have any idea for the fiscal year ending in 2022, what the total amount of hours the cars we used times the $16, what it's worth?
The memo that I sent to the Board of Finance mathematically puts that all out. X number of hours times the dollar equals this amount. So it's all laid out.
So just a question.
Yes,
You can find it.
I can look up the memo. I don't know off the top of my head. I thought you meant, do I disclose?
amazed if.
Yes. Do I disclose it? Yes. Do I know what it is? No.
And with Frontier down,
And the reason it comes to mind, we have $15,000 in the vehicle maintenance line item. So if we get enough money from the renting of the cars, and it's supposed to be somewhat issued for the maintenance of the cars, it seems to me we could eradicate the 15 grand. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, that's why I'm,
so I think,
I don't know the answer to
I
that
think
question either, but I
that-
can-
I think the chief would argue, and I think one could argue that if you have a lot less outside work in any given year, you might sell yourself short.
but he has a balance on the off-budget account. We should also know how much that is.
Yeah.
Because I think you probably have a couple of years of supply.
It builds up and then it comes down a little bit because we top off the gas and we, pay some of the cops out of it, but
Thanks for reminding me.
Yes.
he's had, I mean, the last few years, the police department, I mean, it's crazy, but like I just said, Frontier right now, it's like 7 days a week, they have. So I actually said to him 2 months ago, I said, you guys are gonna have a huge balance this year, probably. Now, I don't know what that's gonna be next year. Every year seems to be a significant amount of work
Right.
outside services, it does. So,
I'm very grateful that we're not using our new cars for that.
yeah, I mean, that plan worked out very well, and that, a lot of that came from this board over the years.
Right, primarily.
I mean, the financing of the vehicles and using not the new cars, but the older cars for the outside services.
So how many cars did he actually sell?
Oh, gosh. I know the answer. I don't know it at the moment.
Did he sell 10?
I don't know. the
I don't
answer. I it's pretty
I
close.
don't.
I don't know. Do you know? Okay.
Because, I mean, that was the deal that we had with him, so I just want to know where all that money went.
It's in an off-budget account, the one that we set up for the vehicle purchases to begin with. And we had that whole memo that outlined it. So we put the money that we borrowed into that account, and we put all the bills through for all the cars, for all the added equipment. Then we put all of the money that we received for each car that we sold into that account, so it's all in one account, all there.
The other thing I want to see if we can maybe get from the fire department. I just recently went through an ordeal with one of my heavy rescues. And I took it over to Shipments, who we do a lot of our work with in town as far as fire department, or they did.
Yeah.
They're certified to work on fire apparatus. They do DOT inspections and everything. And I was amazed that they had such a price structure for doing annual maintenance on the big rigs and how inexpensive it was to do the big rigs compared to them just asking, what was the increase this year was,
For maintenance, about 10 maybe.
no, it was more than that.
For the fire,
For the fire department, the increase in
I
the,
think it was 10,000.
10 or 15 maybe.
that was 20, yeah, so.
So that's fine. Maybe we can.
I just, well, this is what I'm getting at, is they had like 6 trucks in there, and from like Hartford, Waterbury, they're doing their maintenance because they have this structure that's in place. So I'm just wondering if he could look into that, because based upon his apparatus maintenance budget, considering we just bought 2 new trucks and the chief's vehicles are all relatively new except for one.
Rick, you have, I mean.
Yeah, you know what I'm
there's a way
saying?
to stay on top of it better, I'm all for it.
But the other thing is I wanted to find out is, I haven't seen any of the money, and I'm not suggesting anything when I say this. I'd like to see what kind of money they're bringing in for the highway responses. Because there was a law change that now they put in money and they get a sizable amount for every call up on a highway. Let me tell you, they put up on a highway a lot
I don't think they get a ton, $500
per
Incident,
incident.
per incident.
incident. I mean, if there's,
Well, where does the money go and
yeah.
how much is it?
Yeah.
You know, just so that we're aware, because it's town assets that they're using. It's not like it should go anywhere else but
Yeah,
to equipment,
I remember that law and I'm happy to find out.
because,
Yeah. Well,
and the question is, should it, is the other thing. And I'm not looking to take it away from them by any stretch, but as long as it's being used, you know,
And it's $10,000 is the amount.
was the increase?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But you did cut that a little bit.
I did get that right.
Yeah, I think it's because you
No,
cut.
I don't know.
Because I just did one complete overhaul of almost 3 weeks worth of work on one truck and it just hit 10 grand.
Okay.
That's after 3 weeks and there was a lot of rehab.
Does anybody else have any budget?
Thank you.
Okay. Just a reminder, any changes to line items? Got it. Use Crayola and a piece of construction paper, just so long as we have it in writing, so it's easy. And if you want somebody here for the next meeting, give me enough time to so that they can plan also. Okay? Don't move. Or let's move. Selectmen's report.
Just in the Hartford Current today, I've talked about firefighter cancer presumption that's working its way through the legislature. That was front page of the Current today. Please take a look at that and educate yourself on that. It's an issue. We are trying to resolve it in a different way. Probably going to sit down with the Speaker of the House in the next couple of weeks to maybe figure that out. But it's something I've talked about for years, so I'd like to have you guys all. I mean, I don't know if any of you read that. Did you read that article? Only. Read it. Read it. There's also. John, you're better than that. Come on. Read it. Anyway, there's a law working its way through. You probably saw this too, to reduce delinquent tax interest rate from pretty usurious rate, 18%, down to more like 12%. For back taxes. I don't think that will affect us significantly. It will affect every municipality. But that is probably going to pass. I would say.
5 years too late.
Yeah, well. But what towns were doing is they were they were selling the liens to companies and just taking the payment. And then those companies were then prosecuting the foreclosure, and it was hard for people to catch up. Anyway, I don't.
How many properties are in Saybrook that are, let's say, more than 3 years behind taxes? Would you say?
Municipal.
Not a ton.
Definition of a ton.
I don't know. I actually don't know. If there were a lot, I would know. Are there some? I'm sure there are. I have no idea.
Well, back a few years ago, Barry cleaned them up, you know, he did whatever he did, right?
Well, they do it. That's
Lawyer and Clinton.
in February, they send out their delinquent notices. So they go out. And, you know, it was a process in the tax collector's office. And by the way, our new tax collector, third in 10 months, is really one of the reasons we appointed Mark, really put his head down, and he's doing a great job. He has completely put himself into it. And listen, it's no easy task to say, you know, think about this job, okay? This is a job that's an elected position. So it's hard for someone 45 years old working, say, I'm gonna run for tax collector, and then I'm gonna get beat in 4 years and be out of a job, right? So it takes a certain type, retired probably, or near retirement, and you gotta have some smarts, because there's a lot of state law that applies to tax payment. That's a plug for what a good job he's done, and a good job Carol did, and a good job Barry did, but we're on our third and 10, you know, which is pretty remarkable. That's it. I'm not gonna. I want to go home.
Okay, then we will move on to liaison reports. Does anybody have anything to report? Okay, comments from board members. Comments from the public. Is there any public up there? No. I hear a motion coming. Comments from the chair and adjourned.
Yeah, I've got an issue.
Yeah, tell me. I can't get the cord out.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all those in favor?